I'm Tim Ventura, and we're joined today by Dr. Natasha Vita-More, a pioneering leader and community organizer in transhumanism and a proponent of human rights, morphological freedom, and ethical means for human enhancement. Called an early adapter of revolutionary changes by Wired magazine and a role model for superlongevity by The Village Voice, Natasha is the co-founder of the H+DAO, the first transhumanist decentralized autonomous organization, the current executive director of Humanity Plus, has served as the president of the Extropy Institute, is on the scientific board of Lifespan.io, a distinguished senior fellow at the Future of Mind Institute at FAO. As a scientist, she's achieved scientific breakthrough in vitrification and long-term memory. Natasha holds a PhD from the University of Plymouth. Her dissertation covers the theory and practice of life extension. She also holds a Master's of Philosophy and a Master of Science degrees. She's a retired senior professor at UAT, has lectured at Harvard, Stanford, Virginia Commonwealth, Cambridge, Aalto, Polytechnic universities, and more, and was a visiting scholar at 21st Century Medicine. She joins us today to once again discuss transhumanism, human augmentation, life extension, and cryopreservation. So, Natasha, welcome back. It is a true pleasure and honor to have you with me today.
Tim, I'm a big fan of yours, and I follow all your interviews, and I think that you really have a panache for doing this. So it is my pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. Well, thank you for coming back. And so actually you had wanted to come on and speak about what's going on in the transhumanist community. So I thought, why don't we start with that? What is going on right now? Because I know you have a lot scheduled. You have a lot of like future speaking engagements. You're going to be traveling a lot over the next year. What's on your plate right now?
So most interestingly, and I think importantly, it's not just transhumanism. I think it's the larger cause for more awareness about philosophy and why philosophy is important today, which I truly, in my gut and in my brain, think it is. There's so many, let's say, machine ethicists and bioethicists and prognosticators of what we're supposed to be and what we're supposed to do. There's many different theories like existential risk, long-termism, applied altruism or effective altruism, and the list goes on and on. And these are all theoretical approaches to humanity. But what is missing from all of these different groups, who indeed are many doing great work, some overlapping in lots of ways, and some get it wrong, of course, like we all do from time to time. But what is so important today is philosophy. And you might say, why on earth is philosophy important? And in a nutshell, because it has steered study. It has steered every learning field. The sciences, the arts, medicine have all been included in philosophy or called philosophy going back to ancient times. And I think it's important that we realize that philosophy is about the study of knowledge. In every field, from engineering to mathematics, again to medicine, etc., are a study of knowledge to gain information, to whether it's produce a product, to check something out. It's that study that's so important. So generally speaking, philosophy is what I think we need to focus on and take it out of the academic elitist sensibility of terminology and not understanding what the terms mean. Is pretty simple. Philosophy is the study of existence. It's the study of knowledge, and it means wisdom. And we all want to be a little bit wiser, right?
Yeah. Well, you and I were talking the other day, and we were touching on AI. And I think that's an area where philosophy absolutely applies, and it's very timely, right? Because there is so much change and it's so rapid right now. And the way that I would look at that is philosophy provides maybe a larger guide and some context for why we should make decisions with AI, especially in terms of what we allow it to do, what we put it in charge of, and, I guess in terms of what we invest in it, I guess, how much freedom we give it, those are all things where philosophy can tell us this is the direction that we go, as opposed to trying to patch things as problems become apparent, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Because philosophy is about critical thinking. and asks a lot of questions. It's very similar to science in that way. Science, we are trained to ask questions and then try to come up with methods, protocol, hypotheses, and prove them right or wrong. So there is no failure when you prove something that's wrong. That gives you more incentive to find out what does work. Philosophy, looking at ethics, for example, let's see what works. And if something is questionable, we ask questions. And most people, I think, in many fields, when they're confronted with what's questionable, they try to find a resolve very quickly,
Yeah.
um, because we want to close the gap on things rather than leaving them a bit open to find new opportunities and new experiences. So I think that within philosophy, explicitly and implicitly, the study of existence, our existence or the existence of the world around us, what it means to be human, and to develop ability to ask questions and the ability to understand that the core skills that we need are to get beyond or through the mire of this flood of misinformation and false data that surrounds us, and in some ways becomes like tidal waves and undertows pulling us under with it. So if we take our emotions out of the question asking and the resolve for understanding new information, it's healthier for us, and hopefully, and my great wish, I suppose, is that there'll be greater discussions in looking at the fundamental issues rather than trying to, as you say, patch them with band-aids.
Well, and in terms of philosophy, ultimately this comes back down to people, right?
Mm.
And I think one of the things that is so interesting and exciting about your work is that you have been exploring where the human race is going and how we are evolving, as well as how we relate to machines and AI and advances in technology, right? And you have
Right.
done this for a very long time. So, how do you see that continuing to evolve, especially as things change so rapidly?
Probably at the same rate we've seen it before, maybe a little faster, maybe a little slower. I think that there's so many areas that need to be dealt with, not only sociopolitical issues, there's religious issues, there's fundamental moral issues, there's the concern about the have and the have-nots and pollution and the environment. All these become separate silos within our
Yeah,
worry field. And looking at the human condition and how it's advancing, I think that probably we'll see that, excuse me, forgive me for that. I think that having assistance like GPT-4 is good. And even though I don't admire or even like the fact that it steers away from difficult issues, which it does. Didn't used to, but now it does. And even my Alexa steers away, or probably Siri steps away from very controversial issues. I think these these algorithms need to address them and to help us better think. I truly think, and this think is going to be a term I'm going to use a lot in this statement. I truly think that people are thinking better thanks to narrow AI and large language
mm,
models. That when we ask Alexa something, or we ask Siri or GPT-4, for example, or Gemini, any software that we're using, it will give answers clearly. It
yeah,
won't get emotional on us or make accusations. And when the question becomes too difficult, it'll say, I can't answer that. And I think we need to learn how to say, I can't answer that. And there's one person who is exceptional about doing this, and he's a Canadian uh, psychotherapist, psychiatrist, theoretician, Jordan Peterson. And Dr. Peterson has taken on the feminist realm and criticized for it and admired for it. So, there's all sides of
yeah,
that camp. But what I enjoy watching with him is that he listens intently to the questions that are posed to him and attacks made of him. And he will say, well, what are you really asking? what is it that you really want to know? And it gets people to come down to the bottom line is, in that particular instance, the problem in society in the world today is white men. And he shows the ridiculousness of that. It's white men are not this horrible agency that suddenly mushroomed. And slavery was not just white people. Slavery goes back to Egypt, to every country, every civilization has
Yeah.
had the haves and the have-nots. And so we can't blame capitalism or the problems in the world on one particular sector of society. There's so many factors. And when you look at the benefits of Mark Twain and Benjamin Franklin and Churchill and so many people, Einstein, and the list goes on within that particular sector, it's phenomenal. And there have been so many women who have caused problems. Ayn Rand is not someone I value, although as an artist, her work is enormous. Fountainhead and the great books that she wrote and her philosophy that she created. But the rigidity and dogma there is very obvious to me, at least. So I think that it's a combination of things, and I can't find an answer because I don't think there is one, Tim.
Well, it's interesting actually what you're touching on there. I know a lot of people who work in various roles in
Mhm.
government, and one of the common threads that they all touch on is this idea that issues that seem black and white to the general public are many, many shades of gray. All of these things are incredibly complex. And
Yeah.
you'd alluded to AI, and I've wondered that myself. Are we able to put AI in charge of some of these, maybe starting out just routine city functions, right? Things that are really complicated, potentially intractable issues, and, see how it does, and maybe it will manage things better than people because it's not passionate about it, right? It's doing its job, but it
Right, and
doesn't
it's doing
have
its job, it's not on its cell phone. I mean, you
yeah,
speak of that, and not to criticize because I do it too, but just an observation. I went to Walmart the other day, and there are people around there that are supposed to help direct you or guide you through things because they don't have people on the floor that are serving you as customer service in that way. And 9 out of 10 are on their cell phone, and I'll say, "Excuse me,
yeah,
please, could I?" And oh yeah, okay, whatever. And I see that in so many different areas of even with insurance and looking at my Medicare and trying to get through to someone past um, the recorded. And these narrow AI recordings are so great. They're really personalized when you call in any of these government bureaus to ask a question about your insurance, about your taxes. They really have smartened up, but you can't get to a human. And are some instances where you don't have a definitive question that you're asking. You're just trying to figure out what happened to X, Y, or Z, and you can't get there. And it's so frustrating. The different departments oftentimes are not funneling information to each other. So there's this great disconnect while technology is becoming even more advanced. So I agree with you. I think that if we put AI in charge of maybe taking a look at the potholes in the road and filling them, maybe it won't take 3 years, like here in Scottsdale, to fill a pothole in a road or to create a turnabout. Maybe it'll take 6 months.
well,
The Empire State Building was, how it was built in what, 6 months or something, or a year? I can't remember. It's something ridiculously fast. And then today it takes X number of years to build something of less fortitude and magnitude and uh, um, more complex structures.
yeah, yeah. Well, and you're going to kind of the maintenance aspect of things. And I think one of the fears is right now that provides work for humans, but then there's this other question of should it provide work for humans, or should we be engaged in finding our higher selves and moving our species to the next level? Should human labor be involved with repairing potholes just because it puts food on the table? Or maybe we should work on finding other ways to, feed and clothe people, other than menial tasks that
Yes,
waste their lives.
I agree. I think that people are so tired with menial jobs. I know I waited tables in undergrad school. I worked as a paralegal. a litigation expert in, for my higher degrees. I always worked. I never took a loan because I didn't want to have that, that hanging over me. And in a lot of those jobs, I could have done in 3 hours what I was assigned 8 hours to do because, you're just waiting for things to happen before you can write a motion or do discovery or whatever it is. And with, each department trying to get things back and forth, I think that AI would be a benefit, allowing people not to do those jobs where you're sitting down all day and don't want to be there. Um, and I agree with you. I think there is, let's call it a higher calling for humanity rather than doing certain things. Now, I love the exercise of digging ditches. I, plant lots of trees in my yard. In every house that we've had, I've planted lots of trees because I have a tree fetish. But it's, when you think about it, and I'm just going to tie this in. It's not a true segue. It's just a correlation. I was watching this Netflix a series on living. No, it's a film on living to 100 in the blue zones. And there was it started out, I think, in Yokonawa. Then it went to um, Italy, and then it went to South America, then it went to United States, and then it went to, different countries where people live to 100 and why they live to 100, what is that they're doing? And the whole focus was without drugs, without medicine, what are people doing in their lifestyle that allows them or um, is a benefit for them to be 100 and active without dementia. Now, the focus was without the brain fog or dementia or any Alzheimer's or any of the cognitive um, slowdown, extreme slowdown, I should say. And most of the people in these different regions were using their hands. They were, working in the soil and
Yeah.
planting vegetables, or they were walking up and down hills in streets, like in Greece, one area, one blue zone, walking up and down, steep streets. They family community was very important. So it wasn't a consistent type of food that they were eating, but it was something special in their diet at each location. And the fact that they didn't go to the gym, which I do every day, but it's not, if you can do it without going to the gym, that's fine too. And they are physical and they drink wine and are happy and enjoy and life and dance and whatnot. And the large majority of the population lives to 100 and beyond and in really good health. May not be perfect, that's over there, but being as good and fit as you can be is quite wonderful. So the bottom line there is there's no one cure for all of this, but it's an awareness that how we treat ourselves and the people around us does make a big difference. And I think transhumanism and philosophy is very important there because each one of these locations had their particular belief system or their particular philosophy about life. And that's what transhumanism is. It's a philosophy about life. Um, Now, that's not to negate any medical intervention. We need medical interventions, especially in countries like where we are, that food is processed and a lot of the food on the shelves is dirty and carrying E. coli and salmonella. And you look at, where are we getting our food and how are we growing our chickens and beef and vegetables and the pesticides, all that. It's one day we'll look back and go, how did they survive through
Well,
this?
and I mean, people would argue that the system that we have today works, but you could also argue very effectively that the system we have today barely works. And yeah, I mean, you had mentioned going to the retail store and the employees not being interested in their jobs, which isn't surprising, right? And you could mention, 100 other examples of, public or private services where, people aren't engaged or you have processes that have
Mhm.
completely failed and there are hang-ups, it takes too long to get fixed, and again, it's a waste of people's time. And
Right.
so, the question comes down to the value of human life that people
Mhm.
are investing in these things. compared to assigning that to a machine that could do it better and more effectively, and then
Hmm.
finding ways to empower people into something that really matters.
Right. So then the question is, how do we support that with universal health care, um, pay people X amount of dollars just for their lives to live? Um, and then we get into the technology, and it's very transhumanist in looking at the future of molecular manufacturing. And what I love about that theoretical approach, which hopefully will, 3D printing is a first step in that direction, nanotechnology is another step in that direction, and then taking a look at what would full-blown out molecular manufacturing look like, and compare it to maybe, Ray's Kurzweil's book on the singularity is nearer. What does that look like when it happens? Well, it's really exciting, and I love the concept of molecular manufacturing, what the world would look like. And you have a number of different individuals really support the concept of abundance as their particular philosophy of abundance. And you think, well, don't we have too much already? Why do we need more? Why do we need abundance? But what is beautiful about abundance, it's the quality of abundance. You don't need 300 pairs of shoes or even 50 pairs of shoes. You need a few pairs of shoes that feel good on your feet and are easy to move about in, whether you're dancing or
Yeah.
walking or jogging or doing yoga or Pilates. You want the shoe that fits the circumstances. And like with clothes, the same thing. The abundance isn't necessarily so much stuff, it's the quality that you can have it. Where molecular manufacturing really excites me with this is that um, you need glasses, you build the glasses. You don't need glass anymore, you take the molecules and you transmit them into a microphone. You don't need that anymore, you take the molecules and create a desk glass for your desktop. You need a bridge, you have a bridge. You don't need the bridge anymore. Take those same atoms, neutrons, protons, recombine them, and build a road or something else, a boat. And I think that that's where we'll see when abundance really ties into molecular manufacturing. And we have a great sensibility about the value of products around us or the utility of products around us. And you don't use what you don't need. And when you need it, you build it. And if it's not needed anymore, you recycle it into something else. And it's the pure essence of recycling, I think.
Well, and it's interesting that for me, this post-scarcity economy,
Mhm.
right, and this abundance economy, um, in a way, this almost goes back to the idea of extrinsic versus intrinsic human motivation. And right now, so much of our society is based on extrinsically motivating people to do X, Y, or Z, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Get up, shower, shave, go to work, do your thing, come home, make dinner, go to bed. And you've got all of these pressures behind that, and most of those
Mhm.
are external. When we're able to transition into this next phase of human existence, I guess, I think things will be much more intrinsic. And maybe there's almost a sense of guilt with that, If people want to play golf all day, that's good. It's a healthy outlet. Play
Yeah, it's
golf all
healthy. It's
day.
good. You're outside, as long as you don't have skin cancer, but you're outside, you're doing something physical, you're with community, with friends, you're celebrating life.
So exactly, celebrating life rather than slaving away at it. And I think one of the things that, at least for me, is, I try and think about this long line of ancestors that we all have going back, right? And all
Mhm.
of them worked so that their children would have a better life. So
Right.
it's not as if we're getting something for nothing. This is the culmination of generation after generation after generation of
Yes,
human struggle.
right. I love what you just said there because it is, if we look at the continuity of generations over time, the hard work that was done so many years ago, I mean, even to antiquity and before to the Neanderthal period, that all that was done in communication in the cave paintings and the pictoglyphs and in building the tools for survival and protection and forging, and all of it has taken us to where we are today. And this the main thing today is protecting what we have so
Yeah.
that it serves us and everyone, the ecology of life, let's call it, to its most valuable asset. And you don't need more. You just need the finessing of quality. And yeah, I'd rather have one good car than 5 cars in my driveway. It's you don't what is this 2-car sensibility in your driveway. The other thing there that I think is really important when talking about longevity is when I look around and I see so much obesity everywhere. It's not just in the United States anymore. Uh, it's it's becoming a norm. And and I know that we need to be respectful of different people's body forms and body shapes and choices in life and what they want to do and no one should be judging someone else. But I think that the bottom line there is scientifically the evidence is in that the pesticides and the carbohydrates and the trans fatty acids and the way that the food is presented in its packaging and its cooking, you get little nutrition out of a lot of stuff. And why aren't there laws on that? I mean, the FDA will go to the moon and back deciding over and over again whether or not a drug should be allowed when people are dying of a disease. Yet on our shelves in our everyday grocery stores, the food on the shelf is more deleterious to us than the downside of some medication that could save lives. And that type of contradiction that's around us everywhere or almost everywhere is, I think it confuses people. And it's hard to talk about because most of us don't have the knowledge or the research or the questions to ask to get to the root of it. And it is big business, and we understand that. And I wouldn't blame it on any type of economic order, whether it's mixed economy or capitalism or socialism or communism, whatever it is, it's everywhere. And not one economic structure can say, well, we're devoid of that. We don't have that. We don't push these bad things because they are everywhere. And so how would I address that through philosophy? I think that if people had better skills at philosophy as a mainstream discourse or just something we do, that these discussions would be more relevant and more readily available. And I think someone who's working on this a lot is someone who, uh, Bill Maher. I look at what he's doing in his work, and he was very much politically one way, and now he's kind of in the middle. But he's asking
Hmm.
questions of those who he normally would agree with, and saying, "Well, it's not working, so it isn't the right or the left or this way or that way. None of it is really working to the best advantage." And certainly, you asked briefly about the millennials. Are they getting involved? How are they getting involved in all this? And what about the baby boomers? And I thought about that, and it seems that millennials, who are what age 44, I think, to 59, somewhere within that scope or that age range, well, they're starting to feel, a little bit of muscle loss or maybe the beginning of um, osteoporosis or periosteoporosis, or maybe
It
just a
happens to
slowing
all it
down,
happens to
not
all
be
of
able to
us.
run
Yeah.
as fast or lift the weights as hard and fast. So you start thinking about it, and also you start thinking about, oh, how long is my job going to last? And you start getting those gray hairs and those wrinkles, and then it kicks in. So I think the
Yeah.
millennials are getting involved in longevity, at least the external things like skin creams and whiter teeth and these things that are very obvious, dyeing the hair and going to the gym. Investing in longevity necessarily, I think that more and more of them will. But for the baby boomers, those 60 on up, um, there's a lot of attention being paid to it unless there isn't. There's a lot of denial about it. to be sure. And then there's a lot of people that are very deeply interested in it. But I'd say the people interested in living longer, healthy lives far outweighs those who will just submit to being out of shape and feeling, tired or unhealthy.
Well, and you've touched on so many topics. I want to get on to the exercise part of it first, though. I just got back from Asilomar. I was at a conference last week, and the facility I was at, the Asilomar Conference Center,
Hmm.
it was originally built as a YWCA camp of sorts with a bunch of I don't know what you would call it, almost like cabins, right? And so
Right.
everything on this campus involves walking. I think I lost about 5 pounds just walking back and forth, back and forth. My phone tells me I was averaging about 10 miles a day, right? Because I was going to get photos and film in different conference locations.
Right.
And so that is one of the things I think, again, I'm not a medical doctor, I can't offer medical advice, but one of the things that I have seen is uh, you know, like I've read that in Europe, people tend to be a little bit thinner, and part of that is because they don't have that layout for driving like we do in the US,
Yeah.
right? So they are forced to walk more. It's just a more traditional city layout.
Hmm.
So that is really interesting, and it's one of those things, right? That as we get older, we have to start doing this, adding this to our routine to prevent that muscle loss and all of those things.
Yeah, and you're absolutely correct. In the when I was watching that documentary movie on the blue zones, um, the the villages where people walked were
Yeah.
so much better for them, and I kind of miss that. Here in Scottsdale, I can't walk too many places. I mean, we could walk to the park, but there's a big street there, and with the two big dogs, I'm a little nervous about doing that. But I loved it when I lived in Telluride, for example, because I didn't I had a truck, but I didn't drive it. I had a bicycle and a horse, and I kept the horse in my backyard right in the center of town. Then I moved him out to, or her out to the mesa. But I either rode a horse or I rode my bicycle or I walked. Or I know I kept in the wintertime, I kept my cross country skis at the front door. So I would ski
Oh, there you
up
go.
to,
Okay.
I have my office, a few blocks away on Main Street, my studio. But I loved it, and I miss that so much. And a lot of the new communities, especially for the baby boomers or the older, chronologically older population, have it so that you can walk through places. And it's really so wonderful. And yeah, it's hard. You
Well,
can't restructure America because that's the way it is. We're the car industry, and our roads were built when the Ford and you know um, General Motors, and you look at Chrysler and all the car companies, that the manufacturing companies that did create livelihood for people, lots of jobs, and we didn't realize it would get to where it is today.
it's interesting. I think a lot of the social issues that we're struggling with today also, again, comes from these negative extrinsic motivations and negative trends that are outside of us. And I think that people feel a lot of generalized anxiety. I think all of us feel generalized anxiety, right? Uncertainty about the future. We're bombarded by negativity in the media and things like that. There are a lot of things that work against us in modern society. And when
Mhm.
you talk about philosophy, I think part of this is kind of reaffirming the ultimate importance of human beings. That's for me, that's one of the most important parts of this. And when again, going back to this AI jobs issue,
Yeah,
the fact that they're fighting over, AI is going to take the jobs of McDonald's workers, I think to me that it
good.
misses the larger question, right? Of
Yeah,
should those people be doing that job, or can we find something that allows them to
there's
flourish and grow?
yes, let's find something for them to flourish, because most of them are in between jobs or students, and then some people do have a career at it, and find out what they would prefer to do. Um, Working is healthy. Working is great, and it enriches our lives. I I love it when I clean my house. I don't have a housekeeper anymore. I prefer to do it myself. I do have someone who works in the yard because, I can't blow, it's too difficult for me, but I like working on my plants, my trees, and all of that. But these jobs that are not comfortable, although customer service is great for meeting people and smiling. So there, some of those greeting jobs are good, and it's great to go to McDonald's when someone does say, "Hey, how are you?" And so there's, but not for 8 hours nonstop. I
Yeah.
think it's the duration of of it, that 8 hours a day is a long time to be standing on your feet greeting people. That's not healthy for your spine,
Well,
and there's a lot of back problems. So, but I
I
think there's an answer. Mhm.
I don't mean to jump in, but
No, go
this
ahead.
has been on my mind for a while. You mentioned something a ways back. One of the things that has really troubled me, especially since late last year,
Mhm.
is this question of why are we still fighting? And it's one of those things where I mean I'm almost 50 years old now. I'm
I know, it
48.
breaks your heart.
And it's we go from war to conflict to proxy war, and it's just this absolutely ridiculous situation. And there's a part of me that wonders if that isn't also some kind of a structural failure that AI can't fix. And the reason I mention that is you don't see city governments fighting with each other. You don't see a war going on between the city you live in. If you're in Scottsdale, you don't see Scottsdale and Ahwatukee going to war over, this or that right or property or money. But yet, for some reason, on a national, international level, we see these conflicts. Maybe AI can be used to diffuse some of these and
I think the
manage
United
some of the
States
things that
needs
lead
to,
to them.
the United Nations. That's how much I think of the United Nations these days. But I think that the United Nations, um, I mean, talk about a contradiction and oxymoronic behavior, having Iran, the head of peace. I mean, you look at what is going on. Okay, so I think that the AI would be a great mediator in a lot of the
Yes,
very
yes,
much
and
so.
that would be,
Yeah,
yeah, that would be my hope. There's I
mine
mean,
too,
again,
mine too.
yeah, you've got Israel and Hamas are fighting, and Russia in Ukraine, tensions in the China Strait, as well as there are all of these other little conflicts that come and go, come and go, come and go, right? And it's just this thought has been with me for a while. There must be a better way because if we keep doing things the
Yeah,
way that we have, it won't change.
it's like you just want to put your foot down and say enough is enough. Stop it, to Putin, and going into um, another country and just demanding that he wants it just because it's close to a tributary where trade can be more fluid for Russia. I mean, it's just, and you look at the Ukraine, you wonder what was really going on behind the scenes there that we don't know about. And so there's always another story. There's always something else that helped, part of the brew or the soup of stuff, that gets murky and ignited and got to a tipping point. The Hamas, and you look at the different terrorist groups, um, that Iran is supporting and funding and taking arms to, and it's just enough is enough. So when do people stop? And looking at Columbia University today, and I was watching the news this morning. I usually watch 5 different news channels, just go from one to the next to get as much diversity of news so I can have better information. Um, Most of it is really slanted, so I try to find the middle ground there, or some ground. But the Columbia students on campus being told to stop and continue to do it, then get arrested and fighting for Gaza. And then you find out that within the crowd of the students are people paid to go there and to represent
Yeah, I've
Hamas
heard
and
about
to
that.
convince them to do this. And I'm not saying that's the whole thing, but it's part of it. So every particular riotous crowd has some instigator in there that's pushing it to that point. And I was watching the hearings just a couple of days ago with the president of Colombia, and that was just awful to watch. As awful it was as to watch the congressional hearings with the president of Harvard and MIT and Penn State. It's just awful. It is. It's so wrong. And I'm not someone who likes to say this is right and this is wrong, but you know when something is wrong, and it's wrong. Uh,
Well, and as human beings, we do have, from what I understand, we have tribal drives
mhm.
towards conflict, right? And I have done interviews in the past talking about our primate ancestors and distant relatives,
Yeah,
and they have that as well.
yeah.
So you have basically you have cooperation most of the time, cooperation within a group, and then competition between groups, right? And it is interesting to see that, like, on an international level, you see some of the same behaviors. And that's why I wonder if AI might not be able to manage that more effectively, because, I'm wondering if some of this isn't built into us as human beings.
It,
And
it definitely is. Yeah, our pissing turf. This is my area.
this,
And then
yeah,
if like that over there, I'm going to extend my area to include you. You don't matter. And yeah, it's very tribal. We are, but then that's on the good side. For longevity, for example, having a community or a tribe is really important for a sense of security, inclusivity, importance, and love, and to be
yeah.
cherished and respected within your community is really important to us. Um, s- yeah, well, my whole view with the AI is that I will be merging with it as a transhumanist. That's part of my view, and we've merged with the computer a great deal. It's now our memory, and it's a reminder, and it's all around us. Everything we use has a level from narrow, narrow, narrow to more larger, you know, language models in them, to work with us. So it's part of us already. We just Many people just don't want to admit it is, or get upset about that it's changing us. We're no longer human if we merge too much with it. And there, those consequentialists are very Kantian in their philosophy about what they believe is right and wrong. And I think that we need to think more about, not hedonistically about what makes, the greater good or the happiest, all that, but what brings us the greatest peace of mind. And then happiness is the cherry on top of peace of mind. You can't be happy. I can't be happy if the world is fighting stupidly. I can't find peace of mind when when every time I turn on the news, I see this. So what can philosophy do then within this realm of stuff? I think it needs the philosophers who are not segregated into their distinct areas, and it can become like that, just like every field, to encourage people to think more critically about the issues, to ask questions, and to look at all the options, and think about if one of the biggest questions that is being asked today is what does it mean to be human in light of AI and nanotechnology and the advances that are going on, genetic engineering and living longer, basically, well beyond our species, shelf life. What does that mean? Will we still be human? And so, what is it about human that we love? We love our history, as you mentioned, so articulately, and the purpose of that, and to have that continuity. But it's also about, really, what does it mean? And then we get into the consciousness arguments. Daniel Dennett, I think, and David Chalmers would be great on that. um, but and Susan Sontag nicely, and Susan Schneider today with AI. But it's our humaneness, our love of family, our love of learning, our love of sharing,
Mm.
our love of doing good in the world. When we're generous, we feel good ourselves. And maybe that's effective altruism, which gets a little squirrely for me, but it's when I know for myself, and that's all I can speak about, when I do something selflessly for someone else, or just do it because it seems like the right thing to do or the best thing to do. Yeah, I sleep better at night. And when someone
Yeah.
attacks me, and people do attack me stupidly, I just hit delete on the emails. Delete, delete. I do not want to hear it. You know, I don't want to be a part of that. And we talked about this the other day. You know, you just stay away from the those that will, you know, energy vampires that will take you and try to pull you into the darkness. Now we'll get Jungian about this. There is the dark matter, and there's dark sides to all of our psyches. And the human species, we do have a dark side, and it's not to be afraid of it or deny it, but to say yes, that's part of our growing. That's where we were and we're becoming. But in that way, this is where philosophy is really important, not only to understand our lineage, the past history of our species, and what we want to become, because we're still evolving. And not to realize that is to be blinded or have our head in the sand. And we don't want to be ostriches with our head in the sand. So if we are aware that we're still evolving, what do we want to become? And then you get into the philosophy of it and to look at the different sensibilities. And here I think that virtue ethics is probably one of the most valuable transhumanist assets as far as philosophy. It's not utilitarianism or Kantianism or uh, looking at maybe strict regimes within philosophy, consequentialism, etc., but looking at virtue ethics as I think that it was Aristotle. He wrote about virtue as magnanimous human, and and there's an honorability to it, and it's like the knights or the, you know, the goddesses, or you
Mm.
know, to just stand up and say no. And that's what we need to do in the world to Putin, and not to assuage Putin, but to say no, this does not work. But how do we do that without
Yeah.
war? So then the United Nations becomes ineffective. If that is the council that we have to help world orders for our world, our planet, and our species, it's failing us miserably. So why do we allow it to exist in New York City? Well, okay, that's a whole nother topic with lawlessness in New York City and ridiculousness as far as a lack of responsibility for behavior. But you know, so where do we hold people or countries or institutions or theories, you know, accountable?
Well, and these are all such tremendous questions that we have to answer. And a moment ago you were talking about this definition of humanity. I think that it's more robust than we like to admit, and it is interesting that you're placing so much emphasis on culture there. One of the things that comes to my mind is my father has a pacemaker that was
Mm,
recently put in, and other people that I know have artificial joints of all types, right? Knees, shoulder sockets, you name it. Um, we are becoming more artificial as time goes by, but we don't think of people as less human in that regard, right? Neuralink it allows
mhm.
a human being to move a mouse with his mind. We
Right.
don't think of him as being less human because of that. And so
Hmm.
it is a very interesting philosophical area because we really have to define and redefine human beings. And we have seen, again, this goes back to the transhumanist manifesto that you wrote all those many years ago.
Hmm.
You are seeing these things come to fruition.
Yeah.
And, we're seeing, I mean, body modification of all types and forms, right? People, some
Mm,
of it is cosmetic. We're seeing an increase in people getting tattoos and piercings and things like that. In other cases, you have body modification for medical reasons. All of these things are becoming more accepted and more predominant. People are changing genders, on will now. They say, I would prefer to be a woman. I would
mhm.
prefer to be a man. And these all go back to what you had really written about with transhumanism. So, what is it like in the long term view to
Oh,
see all of this come to life?
I, it makes sense, first off. What I like is, I remember in the 1980s when I would talk about this, and when I wrote the manifesto, many of my dear friends, of course, I was in the entertainment industry in Los Angeles, and um, very few people were interested in the future, the field of futurology. It was just, I think, John Nesbitt and F.M. Sfandiari and maybe a few others, but most people weren't interested in the future or technology. And I don't feel out of place anymore. I did, and I lived kind of a dual life. I would, you know, be in my Los Angeles, Hollywood community and putting on events with studios and working with films and stage and all of that. And then to here, um, it's really quite wonderful, but it didn't come about in a way. There's been a lot of hiccups along the way and a lot of wasted time and energy, like the postmodernist, academics fighting against transhumanism and pushing the post-humanist rhetoric and just missing the whole thing, then borrowing from transhumanism in the post-humanist rhetoric and while dissing transhumanism because we're not supposed to live longer and we shouldn't augment our bodies. But now it's so mainstream that many of the within the trans community, there's a lot of faculty within academics in the postmodernist rhetoric that are a part of this. And so I don't even know if they realize the hypocrisy, or it's just very
Well,
bizarre to me.
and
So nothing
some of that
happens.
is
Pardon me.
I was good. I was going to say some of that just, in terms of, I've heard that argument as well, that people shouldn't live longer, which to me seems silly. So Americans spend, I believe, 30 to 50 billion dollars a year on supplements annually. All of that is to be healthier and live longer lives, right? So I understand the rationale of people who say maybe we shouldn't live forever, but the general public isn't on board with that. They want it, they want it.
Yeah, the people want to live as long and healthy as possible. And if you're retiring later,
Yeah.
then you want those your years of golf or just living in an assisted living or with your friends or doing what you want to do in your later years. It's going to be pushed out. So instead of people retiring in their 50s, people are retiring in their 70s now. That's a 20-year gap pretty much. The norm years ago was you retire at 50, 55. Then it became 60, 65. And now it's people are still working in their 70s because they have
Yeah.
to, largely, but also because they want to, because they realize going to someplace and doing something is better than sitting at home feeling lonely. And there's loneliness is a big issue today for people of older chronological years. So yeah, it's so I think that transhumanism is everywhere today, but people still are afraid of the term because they're afraid of philosophy. And that's why I think philosophy needs to become more mainstream. So it's almost like science. Years ago, people were opposed to science. Remember scientism? And science had a bad name because the 1950s and concepts such as what is a normal human? You're supposed to be this size, this height, and certain biases against, certain races and genders and ethnicities and et cetera, height, weight, all of that. And through maybe a wokeness of sensibility, people have kind of, we're diverse. But even within that, there's still a thing about philosophy that's a little bit sketchy, but we forget that philosophy actually, religion was part of philosophy and still is, but philosophy are great thinkers, Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, and many women, to be sure. I wrote one woman's name down. I was going to mention, I can't find where I
Well,
wrote it down, but
and you're touching on, you mentioned religion actually, and I think that's an incredibly interesting area also. And it is well worth exploring a little bit more. I think that is also an area that is far more robust than we give it credit for being. I
yes,
know there are
I,
fundamentalists who are opposed to transhumanism, but at the same time, again, going back to the example of, pacemakers and artificial
mm-hmm,
joints and moving a
mm-hmm,
mouse with their mind, like the Pope has not come out and said these people are no longer human, they're not going to heaven, right?
right,
Religion is able to adapt. And so, philosophically
yes,
speaking, a lot of these social structures that we rely on, that we're, ingrained with, we may choose to move on from them as a society, as a
Right. Hmm.
species, but we don't have to. I think that they will adapt. I think they will
Yes,
adapt to, super longevity and things along those
I
lines.
agree with you, and heaven will just be a little bit further on, you know, or hell a little bit further on. People will. Life is so precious, and I think when people are enjoying life and have that purpose or meaning in their community, largely the community, that they don't want to leave it. And you don't want someone to leave your community. I don't want any
Yeah.
of my close friends and my extended family. I don't want anything to happen to them. I love them. I just had two friends from Los Angeles visiting, Maria and Gary, long, very involved in longevity and the arts and whatnot. And to just be with your close loved friends means so much. I'll be in Berlin next month and seeing friends. And I cherish those moments where I can be and eat and laugh and play and dance and all that stuff. That is so rewarding that you want to continue that as long as possible. It's when you can't dance and you can't laugh and you can't enjoy it.
Yeah.
That's when we kind
Well,
of
and
give up.
this touches on something you were saying earlier, right? The 20th century model, this would be, I guess, our parents, grandparents
Hmm.
generation, but, it was you worked until you were 55 and then you hit the
Hmm.
easy chair and watch TV, right?
Yeah.
And at the time that seemed like it had appeal, but we know now that when people do that, when they stop, they die. Right. And so
Right.
we have to stay active. You have to keep walking and exercising. You have to keep your mind active. I've seen in gerontology, I've seen people urged to do crossword puzzles. If there's nothing else, at least do crossword puzzles, right? Solving those problems will keep your mind active. So, yeah, it's a changing world, and it is all aligning with your predictions. It's all going that direction.
I think so. I think so. And it's not easy, and there'll be problems along the way. And oh, the gods know, whatever gods there are. I've seen them and had to go through the trenches with them. Um, but I truly, truly, I value that human spirit. I value innovation and creativity and love. And I think John Lennon was right. And you know, it's just the to love life and to love other people and to feel loved is why do so many people have animal companions today? Because they love us. I mean, my two dogs are asleep on the floor here. They're so big, they're
Yeah.
taking up half my room. But it's that love. So I was watching another documentary recently on animals and empathy, and it was showing evidence that animals have empathy, and it's just really brilliant about not just dogs, but other animals like your pig or your horse or your rabbit or something, and even your parrot talking to you. The levels of communication are just so amazing. So just imagine that. I don't know if I want to upload my dog or give it, higher intelligence, but I want I want to know what they, if they're upset with me, I want to know what I can do to mitigate that. Or if there's something that they need, I want to know how to provide it. It's just like with, your friends. You don't want them to be totally blocked. You want them to tell you when you're making a mistake or help encourage you to do, something better for yourself and them and all of that. So I think if we can just really push, Tim, the importance of community and shared experience and just the value of being alive. And that again goes back to philosophy. And religion has it, and people love to go to church and sing and the beautiful vestibules and flying art buttresses and rose glasses or stained glass windows, all of that. It does have that architectural design capability of uplifting us. So what can we do without that uplifts us? And that is to remind each other the value as much as possible. And something I'm working on now with writing stories. I just wrote a love letter to the future for a publisher in France. And it's a 10-year tribute to a book that was written 10 years ago. It's 100,000 Years of Beauty. And I was included in that series. They asked me to write something. And it's about being reanimated from cryonics and a letter to the love of my life. And it was really quite wonderful writing it, because I thought one day maybe this will happen. Maybe I will go into chronics and be reanimated or revived. And where would my family be? Where would my, maybe they would be in other environments or platforms or substrates, and what would our communication effect be? But these are important things to think about. And closer to home, when I'm 80 or 90, where will my friends be? And I need them to be alive too. And so we want to expedite longevity and the research and the science and the availability of the tools to extend our lives. But we don't want snake oil. So there's that conflict there too, about how do we get the correct information not to be sold, a placebo. So how do we best find this? And we have our trusted, that's our extended family, people who know. But even within that, when people start, blaming other people or getting angry, because there's a lot of competition in the longevity industry, just say no, don't participate in it. When, you have to do that. And it's really hard sometimes. So here we get back to philosophy and wisdom. Philosophy is the epitome of wisdom. The great philosophers talked about wisdom across genders, across ethnicities, across races, across all life. And so if that's the most cherishable element that we can have, it needs to be practiced every day. It's a muscle, just like our brain is a muscle. Have to practice. How can I be wiser? How can I train myself to think with more agility and reasonability and kindness? And it's not easy for any of us. That phrase, well, I'm only human, that ought not to be an excuse.
Well, Natasha, on that note, we have given people so much to think about today. Let me close by thanking you again so much for your time. It's always a pleasure and a true honor. You have made such a tremendous mark on the world. I mean, you have built an enormous community. Your work has foretold what is happening right now and what is coming next. So thank you so much for joining me. And let me close by asking, I guess I should come back to the conferences, because you were speaking at a number of those. So you're going to have that coming up. Let me close by asking, what is coming up in the near future for you?
Okay, I'll be in Berlin. I'm not speaking at it, but it's just on pitching, ideas. But I will be there with a number of my colleagues in women in longevity leadership. Joanna Bentz is speaking at the conference, and Stephanie Danow is also speaking, but I'm meeting with Maria and Lisa of Sens and other group of women. And this is really great, because women are a strong force in longevity, and we need to really be recognized in that sector, especially in, there's a chronics conference in July. I think I'm doing a panel there, hosting a panel, and then there's a philosophical conference in Rome in August at the largest university in Rome and one of the oldest universities in all of Europe. So it's the 25th Congress on philosophy. So that's going to be really quite remarkable. I'll have all that on my website. And then there's the Afro Longevity Conference at a university in Nigeria. And that is something that we all need to be paying attention to, whether you can be there or not. Support it in any way you can. And that's quite wonderful. And there's always conferences coming up. In fact, there's so many conferences today on longevity. They're all great. And no, not one is any better than the other. They all have their unique style and contributions to the growing, not only longevity industry, which is now worth, many, many, many billions of dollars, going into the trillions by 2050. We need to think about what that industry is doing and help be guiding lights there, and also um, taking a look at uh, just people in general, what we could do to have more parties, more fun, more entertainment. So, and I look to you there because I hope one day you actually do something really marvelous that the world can see, Tim, because you have a knack of digging into the core areas that are important for all of us, and your presence is quite phenomenal.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you so much. Well, Natasha, let me thank you again one more time for your time today, ma'am.